Alrighty, so for our last look at operators, I'm going to go ahead and talk about error handling. So there's two operators in regards to error handling that you're going to want to know about. One is catch, and the other one is retry. So remember, if an observable fails, then it's done. It doesn't it doesn't produce any more values. It's just like calling completed, except an error happens. So for example, if I do Rx observable concat, and now obviously if I did Rx observable of 42 and 10 or whatever, and I subscribe to this, create subscriber, and we'll just do catch, or yeah, we'll do catch here. And then I run this. We'll see that we get next 42, next 10. However, if I did Rx observable throw of new error bleh, notice how we get next 42, then we get an error, and then we don't get 10. So how do we fix this? Well, I'm going to go ahead and put together a quick example of a observable that does a web request. So we can go ahead and just say, actually I'm going to write this as a promise. Whatever, either way doesn't matter. Get API, blah, 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 console log, getting API. And then I did return new promise, resolve, reject, blah, 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 set timeout. See, I didn't do it that time. 1 second, and then resolve hello. So if I went ahead and said Rx observable, something like from promise, get API, and then I did subscribe, create subscriber API, it says getting API, and then it says next hello and API.complete. But what if this threw an error instead? What if instead of resolving hello, I rejected new error? So we get getting API, but then we get API error. And what's interesting is everything in the pipeline isn't going to work anymore. So we could do console log thing. Notice how we said getting API, and then we got the error. This do console log thing didn't apply. Well, why didn't it apply? Because we didn't get a actual item to do anything on. Furthermore, when the error happens, we immediately unsubscribe, and whatever source that we started with also gets unsubscribed from. So error handling is very important. So we obviously need some way to handle these errors because oftentimes we will receive errors. So one way to do that is catch. And with catch, I can go ahead and say catch error, and I can simply return Rx observable of error. And this will do the thing, and it'll do the perform the next operation and complete the pipeline. And what it does is it wraps this error into an item. So now the error is being sent down the chain as a normal item, and the subscription chain no longer fails. Now that's generally what you're going to want to do if you want to display an error to the user. You often, in some circumstances, you will not care about the subscription terminating after the error, and you'll want to just handle the error condition and display a message then. Other times an error might happen in a observable workflow where you don't want to unsubscribe from everything. I mean, honestly, if this is your only subscription to like an event handler or something, once that error goes through, that subscription is gone, it's dead. So in that case, you would wrap that in catch. And again, catch, all it does is it gets the error object, and then it allows us to change it into something else. And in this case, I'm simply wrapping the error in an observable. But what if we wanted to retry X amount of times? So I wanted to go ahead and say, what I can do in one line of code, I can say retry. And now what it's going to do is it's going to error, and then when the error happens, it'll go ahead and restart the workflow. Now, unfortunately, this is a bad example because we're getting this observable from a promise. If instead we rewrote get API to actually return a proper observable, so we said return new observable, or rx.observable, observer. And here, I'll put the getting API in here. And then I'll say something like set timeout. No, set timeout in 1 second. and then I'll say observer next, A, and then observer complete. We ran that, we'll get getting API, and then we'll get our thing and our hey. But if I said observer error, new error, now when we do that, we'll say getting API, getting API, getting API, because we keep on retrying and retrying and retrying. We could also pass in a value to retry such as 3, so only retry 3 times. And then after that, it completes and it errors. So it actually, the retry 3 made getting API happen 4 times because of the first call, and then it retried 3 more times. Now, it's important, the reason why it wasn't working before with the promise is because when you resubscribe to a from promise, it keeps that promise resolved or rejected state cached. Whereas if we resubscribe to an observer, the observer generator function gets created. So that's a very important difference between promises and observables if you're combining the two. And that's really it. So we can retry and X amount of times, and if we got an error, also note it is saying API next error, but because that's because I have this catch handler here. If I didn't have that catch handler here, it would get API 4 times, and then it would completely just die. API error, error. And that would result in an unsubscribe and all that fun stuff. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up our operators, particularly our error handling operators. And there's different combinations we can do those in. There's a couple other overloads. If you're interested, definitely check out the documentation. But that's just an example of what you can do with reactive extensions. So hopefully retry, when I first noticed retry, I was always confused about how exactly it worked, but hopefully it makes sense because retry subscribes to this. When it subscribes to this function is called, and if there's an error, it unsubscribes from it, then resubscribes to it, causing this function to get called again. So note that that'll only really work on cold observables. Retrying on a hot observable makes no sense because you recreate the, you resubscribe, but it doesn't redo the generator function. It doesn't redo whatever the thing it is that it needs to do. But anyway, so that is error.